Good afternoon. This is Carol Stimmel in the Engerati studio at European Utility Week 2016. And I am here today with one of actually my favorite interview subjects, Perry Stoneman, who is the Global Head of Utilities at Capgemini. Thanks so much for coming back again this year.
It's a pleasure,
and
Carol.
having a chat with us. So Capgemini just published its 18th edition of the European Energy Markets Observatory. So 18 years. What is it about, and what are you bringing to us this year?
Well, for 18 years, we've been looking at the energy and utility environment in Europe and benchmarking companies and watching trends and the impact. This year's report in particular, our 18th, is quite interesting. It'll be the last year it's only Europe. We're going to make this a global report next year, Carol.
Good.
But the report does dive into climate change, and for the first year, we really are seeing that climate change is a global phenomenon following the COP21 Paris Accord. And so we're going to take advantage of this report, really driving into the challenges and the changes coming as a result of climate change, which is pretty much undeniable now.
Right.
As the energy is part of the largest sector to contribute to the reduction of greenhouse gases. So the report is available on our website, or just go Energy Market Observatory from Capgemini, and you'll be able to download it. It's a free report. And it's a very interesting read for those that are in the industry.
But you mentioned one thing. So I've been in research a long time. I think that's how we met. And so benchmarking is an incredibly important, critical, and useful tool for this industry, not just for the utilities, but for all kinds of people watching it, trying to create policy, trying to create products. Tell me what you're benchmarking. Like, what am I going to learn from this?
Oh, the number of pages and data is probably too.
Yeah, you don't need
detailed.
to read it to me.
But I'll give you some examples. We're benchmarking cost to serve, we're benchmarking churn in the retail market, we're benchmarking interconnections, we're benchmarking percentage of renewable versus traditional energy sources. Pretty much anything that affects the industry has data in the data set.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, what you can do with the data, I was just recently in Singapore meeting with their board and leadership team, and they were interested in what are the trends around churn, because they're heading to market deregulation. And Europe is probably the number one location to see what is the impact on churn for a utility. The report, because we've had it 18 years, will allow our consultants to go back in time and see the events that occurred historically that triggered churn. Maybe to give some advice looking forward.
That was my question. So there's data everywhere, right? So there's always kind of like, well, why do I need you? I can just Google the information, right? And the problem is we don't have context. So it sounds like if I'm looking through this report and I see something I don't understand, or it's a market I'm trying to move into and I just am struggling, or I'm making things up that are just wrong to try to fill in the blanks. Capgemini helps me understand what it means and maybe how to strategize with it.
Yeah, we interpret the data to set context.
Okay, great. That's critically important because in the world of big data, you know, that's a real struggle. So, is it different from last year? Or have you upgraded what you're looking at?
Every year it changes incrementally.
Okay,
the industry doesn't change overnight, but we are seeing some significant trends, or the impact of renewables in some parts of Europe is unquestionable now. The wholesale market pricing was an incredible shift last year.
Right.
So the report has some findings now that are kind of really forecasting and signaling that the change in the energy mix is profound and not going to stop. Okay,
so thank you for that, but now I want to find out a little bit more. I want to dig into that pretty packed statement that you just made. You said there were some profound changes. Can you walk us through some of those observations, the profound changes, and what you've been in the market a while, what does that mean? What do we want to take away from this?
Well, I think there's been an acknowledgement that renewable energy and the price of renewable energy is here to stay. And when you have corporations looking to procure green energy for a decade, whether it's Google in a new data center or a manufacturer in North America wanting to reduce their carbon footprint early, and that the answer happens to be large-scale solar and large-scale wind, It's not being driven just by consumer sentiment anymore, or government policy.
Exactly.
It's being driven by industry.
Right.
And that's the profound change, I think, it was a tipping point we're starting to see.
And that subject, it must be profound for a lot of players in Europe, because it's come up in nearly every conversation. So if I'm talking about consumer retail strategies or call centers, that keeps coming up. So I think that's important to dig into. So you also have a position or some advice for us on thinking about the issues around regions, how we should be installing renewables, what we should be thinking about, how to kind of learn from the past to create a more powerful, better strategy going forward.
Yeah, I think we need to make sure that the existing incumbents, the DNOs, the grid operators, have a larger voice in the energy transmission. If we want the grid here to stay, and we want to be able to allow people to use that as a transport, whether it's sharing solar energy or battery stored energy or commercial companies, we have to respect the fact that that grid needs to be strong.
Right.
And the first thing we're doing to the grid, by not having policies or a stronger voice of some of the grid operators on where renewables go, is we're compromising that infrastructure. Yet regulators are slow to find ways to compensate them for the investments they need to make. In fact, sometimes if you put renewable in the wrong location, that investment could be quite daunting.
Yeah. I mean, we have still not seen enough cohesion among the vendors and their solutions in that way. I mean, I know people who've struggled with making expensive storage purchases, and then the storage company's gone by the time the box shows up, right? And so I think maybe that's a little bit of the problem you're touching on. What is your recommendation about getting some cohesion here so that we can, not have a gain in one column and a loss in another?
It's a complicated question. I'm not sure I have a fantastic answer for it, other than I think large companies are starting to come together. We're seeing the industry players starting to realize that manufacturers, transportation, utilities need to start aligning with each other. And I think once large industry aligns, we can start getting better alignment with the consumer side of the equation too. But it's a very complex equation. How do you have new entrants come into a market and act them to play nice?
Well, I think it's a new way to think about business, right? It's a very new perspective to realize that you must actively partner, and that the efficiencies are now gained across the industry, not just you doing your own thing the best you can. I think that's what I hear you saying. We are actually out of time, so that went really quick. Do you want to just say where we can find this one more time on the internet?
It's as simple as going to the internet and looking for European Energy Market Observatory, Capgemini, and you'll find our website. Or go to the capgemini.com website and you'll find a link to the report, and it's downloadable in two versions, a web-enabled version and the full report can be downloaded.
I think that's really valuable, so I'm going to download it too, unless you're going to leave me that copy.
I'll leave you this copy, Carol.
All right, Perry, thank you so much for coming in again. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you.
All right.
Likewise.